So, I started writing a novel a while back. It's called The Quiet Chaos Driving Me Mad, and it's about relationships. And I'm hoping that maybe if it gets positive reception, I'll be inclined to make more content relating to this. So, we'll see what happens. Okay, chapter one. There are very few guys that have been down the road I have, spending some of their time in deep thought on the subject of the opposite sex. A lot of times you have people that will tell you two different things. Some men and women will say the way to get a woman interested in you is to act with confidence while also doing the things that you would normally do, like hobbies or particular goals. Others will claim that you have to adopt a mindset of not caring about it, pretending if you are a man that there is no such thing as the opposite sex until one of its members decides that you are worthy of speaking to. I've embraced the first one of those two at times and spoken about my interest in things, usually toning it down and asking the woman of hers. You'll be surprised by the number of them that can't just outright say what they like. If I had a dime for every time one said I'm into many things, or some variation, I'd be able to acquire a small fortune in a matter of months that would be able to put my best friend, two siblings, and multiple cousins through school no matter where they attended. When it comes to the other stance, that of pretending they don't exist until one selects you, places women as these deciders of the world that have all the power when it comes to determining what men matter. I also know that some will read this and come to the conclusion this is an attack on all women. I've always rationalized that were the women I shall describe the majority or the entirety, you wouldn't have a large number of relationships that last for longer than a week or for a lifetime. These were the ones that didn't waste time, that thought about what they wanted and decided on what they should get. For this group of non-time, life-wasting women, they knew to not exercise stagnation as it pertained to the men who courted them and sought progression. I admire this group and have actively sought a member of it. The problem is that on an appearance level, there exists no way of determining them from the group that seeks to waste time talking to men who they were never serious or considering being with. I look at life as this opportunity to make an impact in a limited time. Whether you remain for 60 or 90 years, you will eventually be called away to an ascension for which those close to you will not be able to reach you until the time they depart in a similar fashion. And with this mindset, which may possibly be one that is exclusive to me and a handful of other people, I've come to despise this game of dating. In particular, certain tips, such as waiting a couple of days to speak or hours to respond to text. If I know a person, if I know I like the person, why would I not want to talk with them as much as I can? This figures into my goal of marriage, which is, if successful, would entail the two of us seeing each other daily. I can understand not wanting to speak every hour of every day, but in my view, if a relationship becomes so close that this person is aware of every facet of my life, we probably will have hours of things to discuss, and that doesn't have to be every day or every week. It will be recurring, however. That could be every 10 or 20 days. It's been about that time since I last approached someone. My mother and I were walking through the mall, the place being filled with people of vastly different ages. There was a group of men strolling into a shoe store and an elderly couple viewable in the candy store. The two of us walked past this group of adult females that looked to be in their early 30s. One of the women was holding hands with the man, the sole male member of the group, and staring into his eyes intently. The gaze with which she held on him was enough to tell me that a locomotive speeding toward her wouldn't be enough to stop her from this public display of affection. When the pair were through walking past us and a fair distance away, I stopped and looked back for a few moments, the woman's stare at her male friend continuing through that time. He continued to look forward while the center of the back of his head shined on. I then felt a tug at my shoulder. My mother had apparently become tired of me standing in place, and without words, we boarded an escalator. The whole thing sickens me, I said. You get mad whenever you see a happy couple, she told me. That might be true, but I'm talking about the guy pretending she didn't exist, and her still giving him those eyes. And that's bad because interest shouldn't be a two-way street. If you saw me doing that to a woman, you'd say I was heartless or treating her like dirt. I probably would say both of those things. But you get so mad over people you don't know having something that you want. Get over it. I rolled my eyes and proceeded into a clothing store. The left side was composed of men's wear and the right women's. Hardly ever did I get anything out of these types of stores. More often than not, when I saw some shirt, is one that I could hardly picture myself wearing more than once or twice. It was kind of funny how contrasting my views on clothes were with that of people, especially the ones I preferred to date. If you were to approach me while I was walking down the street, just engage me on what my preferences in women were, I would likely say that I could amend many of my requirements that the ideal partner would have met. Whereas with clothing, there was a particular style that I favored and would not tolerate if not met. The store was a very wonderful, neat place. That was something I chalked up to the staff present when we entered. Roughly 5 employees, 2 males and 3 females. There were two males in the men's wear section, a woman in the women's section, and the 2 other women were at the cash register as though on standby for someone to come along and seek them out. There was hardly anyone else in there apart from the 2 of us and the employees. The workers that were dispatched all seemed to be engaged in conversations amongst each other. The 2 males talking about something that I couldn't make out, and the lone female employee not working at the cash register conversing with the female that had questions regarding the products. My mother stepped over to the women's wear section and grabbed a shirt, holding it to herself, and I stared at my cell phone. "Are you ready?" she asked me. I nodded and we walked over to the cash register, where one of the females turned her attention to us and took the shirt from my mother, who handed her enough dollars to pay for it. While this transaction was going on, I tried to sneak some peeks at the face of this woman, who had dark brown eyes, dark brown hair, a t-shirt that was dark brown, some pants that were probably dark brown, a watch that was dark brown, and I'm sure she had on some dark brown undergarments to complete the set. That last one will never be known for sure, so I just assumed that she recognized her own color pattern. While I was looking at her I was looking at her look at my mother. The woman who gave birth to me made a grunting noise that propelled me to turn my eyes to her. She was smirking, and we walked away from the register as the transaction had then completed. There were probably 2 or 3 steps on the part of us before my mother tugged at my arm and I looked at her with confusion. "I saw you looking at her," she told me. "And I saw you doing the same thing," I replied. "Should I alert my father that you dared to look at a person you weren't related to?" "You should ask her for her number." "I'm going to ask a person I've never met before and will probably never meet again for her number." "Couldn't hurt to try." As logically as I tried to look at the situation, the point she made, though brief, was taken. I didn't go back into that store because I saw something for sure, but because I saw something that could be. When I stepped up to this unknown woman, she already surprised by the act, and I placed my hand behind my back while I spoke to her. "So I thought you were attractive and I wanted to ask you for your number," I said. She looked at me for a few seconds and then smirked, me looking back at her with a small smile that wasn't too happy nor too disillusioned. It was the kind of smile you make when you find out that you have had just enough of something. The one I made next was the kind that comes when you welcome the birth of your first child or win the lottery. She removed a piece of paper from a drawer that was hidden from where I was standing when not pulled out and wrote a number on the form. She handed it to me and I smiled back at her. "Thank you," I said, shaking her hand and walking away. My mother had been waiting outside the store, folding her arms while smiling back at me when I walked out. We took barely 4.5 steps before she tugged my arm and I looked back at her. "So it looks like you got more than you asked for," she remarked. "That's about right," I replied, looking at the paper. "I can't wait to talk to her." In examining it further, I saw that she had written the name Shannon right above the paper. I stopped in place, my feet crackling against the white marble floor beneath us, and typed both the number and name into my phone. I sent a text message that read, "Hello." I then placed the crumpled paper into my pocket and we continued our strolling until reaching the food court. This part of the mall was occupied by several children, a playpen where 2 large couches rested, both of which seating several adults that I assumed were either the parents or legal guardians of the various children there. Even though I had been coming to this mall since I was roughly 6 or 7 years old, I had never once played there. That thought came to me while watching these children play around. I'd point out the only reason I was doing this was so I could pass time while my mother went to retrieve some food for the both of us. After that order was completed, she walked over to me and I turned to her, and hearing footsteps I concluded were probably hers. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "Yes," I answered. While the 2 of us walked through the same way we had come, I took a brief glance into the clothing store to see Shannon. It was my first time looking at her since getting her name and her number, and I thought subtle enough that she wouldn't see me or believe that I was coming on too strong, and I was only doing it because it happened to be there. All the things that made me think it was no big deal seemed to be in place. She was at the cash register still, but now there was a young guy that was standing on the side of the register, and he had a wide smile, very similar to the one I had when I obtained her number. She had his hands in his he had his hands in his pockets, and she had her hands over her mouth, closing her eyes while laughing at something that had come out during their conversation. This sighting lasted for only a few moments, as I was taking steps the entire time, but that brief view was enough to run several scenarios in my head. Even in thinking the worst one, that she was with this guy, I figured that the biggest offense I had committed was naively approaching someone that was already with another person. By the time we both sat down in our vehicle, my mother looked at me and smiled. "I saw you seeing her," she said. "I saw her seeing another man," I told her. "Don't overreact. Why would anyone give someone their number when they're with someone?" Her good points rang true again, and I swallowed my suspicions for the remainder of the day. When I arrived home, my father was sitting in his chair and watching some television with my little brother and sister. Though it was a weekend, my father dressed fairly formal, wearing a white button-down shirt with the shirt tucked into his gray pants and shoes that matched. There was a can of Sprite on the side of the chair, and next to the right arm of my little brother, he was sitting next to the can with his eyes closed and his head leaning back. I would have thought he was asleep were it not for his hand moving slightly when we came in. My sister was eyeing the TV intently. "So what came out of that little mall trip?" my father asked. "I managed to get a number from this very attractive cashier," I told him. "Sounds like a plan. Has she responded back to you yet?" "No, but I have hope." "Make sure you don't do that thing where you type paragraphs to every word she sends. Nobody wants to read that." "I do that with you all the time." "Yeah, but I'm used to it, and we're not trying to impress each other." His words seemed to want me to remember something, and my mind withdrew to the past while I looked at him. The thought of the previous year in particular, me sitting in my bedroom during an early morning, came to me. Around this time, I had become acquainted with a woman that I had met while at the market. Her name was B, and I'd asked her if I could have her number after we engaged in a brief talk. By that point, we had been speaking nearly every day for 3 weeks. She would send me a few lines about how her day had went, and I would do the same. "Hey," I texted her. "Hey, she responded to me. "How are you?" "I'm doing okay. What about you?" "Hanging in there. I don't think I'm going to do much today." "Well, you can get some rest and sleep in." "I don't think I want to talk to you anymore." "Why?" "You always answer me a bunch of stuff or barely type that much to me, like right now. How can I believe that means you really want to talk to me?" "I'm literally sending you back what you sent me. My messages have been around the same length as yours." "But I want to talk to someone that doesn't feel they have to change who they are to talk to me." That may be the dumbest thing ever written. I blocked her number afterward. One mind said wait until she responds and see how that goes, but the other part figured that nothing of any decency would come out of further interactions with her. The rest of the day, from the afternoon to the early evening, was filled with me doing chores around the house, and my two siblings followed behind me while I was doing them. My little brother walked to the trash can with me while I was taking out the trash. My little sister came to my room to lay on my bed while I was on the floor watching television. One could argue that me laying there was childish, but I didn't feel that way. She left my room about an hour and a half later, and I stepped over to my cell phone, which I had placed on the charger next to my bed. "Hi, I really hope the rest of your day will go good," Shannon wrote. I looked at the message with a smile at first, and then a look rescinded from my face, as the thought of who that guy that she was talking to was came to dominate my inner feelings. I don't know for sure that the guy is someone she's dating, I thought to myself. Maybe if she's texting me back, then that might mean she isn't with him. "I appreciate that. How was the rest of your day?" I asked. "Okay, just getting ready to go somewhere." "Ah, maybe you and me can hang out eventually." "That might not happen. The person I'm with won't like that." "I'm guessing that person's a he." "Yeah, we've been dating for 3 months."